We are in the series on the Gospel of Mark. Sounds real serious. It is. I want to start with these words. They're from the book referred to as the Book of Common Prayer by Thomas Cranmer. Yes. This is part of a prayer in that book. Grant that we may follow the example of Jesus' patience. Sounds good, but do we know what we're asking for in all of that? These are words that are, this prayer was actually written for Palm Sunday, the week before, or during Palm Sunday, just a few days before Jesus is crucified on the cross. Patience is love for the long haul, right? I guess you could say. It's bearing up under difficult circumstances without giving into bitterness. Patience is working when gratification is being delayed. It's taking what life offers, even if it means suffering a bit and not lashing out. Easier said than done. When you're in a situation that you're troubled over, when you're in a situation when you feel pressed that you need to achieve something in a certain amount of time, when there's a delay, when there is that pressure on you that is just so daunting, when something is happening in a way that you did not want it to happen, there's a tendency to run out of patience. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I run out of patience without even knowing it. And then it has to be pointed out to me. You're being really impatient, Steve. Cranmer's prayer is pretty poignant, really. Prayed a few days before Jesus' death on the cross. And here's Jesus in that final week of his life being very patient with his enemies, with the Roman authorities, with many of the religious leaders, being patient with his disciples who are not understanding him, being patient right up to his execution. Today, in the Gospel of Mark, the writer records a meeting between Jesus and a religious leader. And we will see in this meeting that some patience is being called for. This leader, his name is Jairus. He's a synagogue leader. Okay? So he's a person of great devotion to God. He's morally respectable. He's a figure that is looked up to in society, a figure of wealth and social prominence. Let's look at the Markan scripture here. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at Jesus' feet. What's that all about? Jairus is a person of authority and notoriety, of standing within society, and yet he falls at the feet of this itinerant rabbi, this traveling rabbi, this Galilean carpenter, this person we know of as Jesus. And fairly desperate. I mean, he's falling at the feet of Jesus. So what's going on? What's the problem? Let's see what Mark says. Jairus pleaded earnestly with Jesus. My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with Jairus, and a large crowd followed and pressed around Jesus. Here's Jairus. His little girl is dying. Okay. She's probably as good as dead, he's thinking, unless Jesus comes and heals her. Imagine Jairus' excitement and the hope that Jesus is going to heal his daughter. His insides must have been churning. We've got to get there. We got to get there before it's too late, before she passes. We've got to get there, Jesus, right? So there's Jesus and there's Jairus, and there are the disciples and others of the crowd hurrying along to Jairus' home. And this crowd does follow them. Along the way, though, there's an interruption. You guys ever been interrupted before? Oh my gosh. I mean, life is just that, isn't it? I mean, interruption is just telling us that it's just something's not going the way we want it to go. It's just, but interruption is life. It is life. You know, we get, no, this is how it has to go. No, you're going to go on this trail right now. It's going to be okay because life's over there as much as it is over there. It just is. Okay. Jesus gets interrupted by this woman. And it's a woman with great need. Okay? When I was back in Falls Church, Virginia, my first church, I was the associate minister there. And there was an entryway to that church you could walk into before you actually go into the church. It was an entryway right off of the parking lot. So it was enclosed. And inside this entryway, which wasn't ever locked, there was a gentleman, looked like perhaps he was homeless. He had slept there that night. I was informed of it right before worship. So I went out to talk to the gentleman. And as I was talking to him, I was told the senior minister and the elder said I need to get back inside the church because worship has started and they're getting impatient. And I said, just tell them to be patient because worship is happening out here also. Now, I was a 24-year-old kid. I had no idea what I was saying at that point to the senior minister and to the elders. But here was a man who needed help. And as far as I was concerned, this was ministry and this was worship, every bit as important as what was going on in that sanctuary. They didn't quite understand that, but I tried to explain myself after service. In our story, Jesus is on his way to Jairus' little girl, and he's interrupted by this woman with great need. Let's take a look. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. The text says that she suffered a great deal under the care of many physicians, many doctors, and grew worse. Basically taken advantage of, you could say. She suffered from her disease, but she also suffered from the form of treatment. She had exhausted, very likely, her finances and medical options. And when she'd heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him and he turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? Crowds pressing in on Jesus. I mean, people had to have been bumping into him, right? Very likely. And this woman touches Jesus and she is healed. Jesus realizes that power has left him. This word power is the first time we see it in the Gospel of Mark, the Greek word dunamis, meaning dynamite. So it's like dynamite just left Jesus. Something left Jesus, some great power, and filled a person. That's pretty much Jesus' entire ministry, isn't it? Giving of himself to others, giving of himself to humanity. This kind of foreshadows the cross, even, you could say. Interesting. Jesus has this, I guess you could say, perhaps a sensation of weakness, of draining. He knows that someone has been healed. He has lost power for someone else to be healed. He stops his entourage, if you will, and he says, who touched me? And the disciples respond to Jesus, you see the people crowding against you. His disciples answered, you ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, at Jesus' feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. This sick woman came to Jesus for healing. She was kind of hoping it would be like a touch and run moment, kind of like, I'm going to touch him and get out of here as quick as possible. Why? Because she was deemed to be unclean. And an unclean person like her touching a rabbi, oh my gosh, that's a social no-no and a religious faux pas. You just don't do that. You know, if you're unclean, you don't touch someone clean like a rabbi. But she thought, maybe I could just do that. But that was taboo. And yet here's Jesus wanting to call her out. All right, who was it? I know someone touched me out there in that crowd. Jesus knew that this woman needed to do this, okay? As difficult as it was going to be, because she had this superstitious perception of Jesus' power. I'll just touch his cloak and I'll be healed. Jesus sees the woman as she comes forward in fear. And he had to know the courage that she must have had to be able to do that and not run away in fear. And he says to her, essentially, this is a paraphrase, "Daughter, what has healed you is not the touching of my garment, but rather your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now here's Jesus interacting with this woman, okay? Inviting her into a lifelong, transforming relationship with Christ, with God. Imagine during this time, though, how Jairus and the disciples must have felt. I was like, really, Jesus, we don't have time for this. Jairus' daughter is dying. We've got to get going. This woman's been bleeding forever. Come on. We can deal with her later. Not now. Not now. Jairus' daughter. But Jesus, in the midst of this, is patient. And he's composed. This woman with this chronic condition is getting the attention rather than that dying little girl. Jesus chooses to stop to be with this woman. It doesn't make sense. It seems irrational. There's malpractice really going on here. If both of these individuals today were in the emergency room and a doctor went to go heal this woman who was bleeding and let that little girl die, he'd be sued. That's just malpractice. Jesus is behaving, you could say, like a reckless physician. And Jairus and the disciples are like, "What are you doing? Don't you understand? We've got to get there. Jesus, you have to get there. She's going to die if you don't get there in time." Jesus is not to be hurried. But what Jesus feared, or what Jairus feared, happens. While Jesus was still speaking to the woman, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, saying, "Your daughter is dead. So why bother this rabbi, this teacher anymore? Can't help you. She's gone. You know, he didn't get there in time." Imagine how Jairus must have felt towards Jesus at that moment. Imagine how you would feel. And Jesus looks at him calmly and told him, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." In this context, and looking at the Greek words, he could also be saying, "Trust me here. Be patient. There's no need to hurry. It's going to be okay." You know, every culture has a different sense of time. And it's very evident when these cultures kind of cross over each other. You have a cross-cultural experience or event. The very first church I was at in Falls Church, and the very first wedding I ever did was a wedding between a gentleman who was a Muslim, and it was his third marriage, and a girl who was Catholic, and it was her first. Okay, and I'm thinking if every wedding's going to be like this, I don't know, right? What a challenge. But what we had here was the differences of cultures as well. Okay, the groom's culture, you know, if you're 15, 30 minutes late, 45 minutes late, hour late, didn't matter. You know, you get there and we will move on. The bride's family, on the other hand, wedding begins at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever. All right, you be here. The bride's ready to walk down at this time. Everything's in sync. So I was standing there in front of the those who were gathered together, saying to the bride's side, who was just hectic and furied, and they just didn't know what was going on, except for the bride, she understood. They were just like, I'm trying to calm them. And over here, they're just easygoing. The groom's family and friends, they're just like, it's going to happen when he gets here. It's all good, you know? There's no need to worry. It gets interesting sometimes. God's sense of timing, though, dear friends, will confound ours constantly, no matter what culture we come from. Okay? God's grace rarely operates according to our schedule, okay, in the ways that we want. Imagine if you just were able to, call God, all right? You want to get hold of God. And I'm going to click that off. And, dealing with God's timing. So let's just say this is a direct line to up above. It's going to voicemail. Can you believe that?
Thank you for calling God. If you wish to offer up a prayer of thanksgiving, please press 1. There is currently no wait. If you wish to intercede on behalf of a friend or a loved one, please press 2. There is currently a 4-minute wait. If you wish to offer God advice, please press 3. There is currently a 9-hour wait. If you wish to intercede on behalf of an annoying person who you want to get saved so they'll be nicer and stop bugging you, please press 4. There is currently a 12-year wait. If you wish to request something you think you need to be happy, but really don't need it all, please press 5. There is currently a lifetime wait. If you wish to learn a complex theological concept just so you can impress your friends and feel really smart, please hang up and check your attitude. For a terrific unleavened bread recipe, please press 6. If you wish to learn patience, please stay on the line. For a complete by name directory of the heavenly host, please press 7. If you wish to grow in your relationship with God or to simply enjoy His presence, please disregard this menu completely. Hang up and wait.
Imagine. God, really, you don't work on my time frame. What is this all about? Come on. You're my paisan. What is this all to deal with me now? Now I want to deal with things. Jesus is telling Jairus, trust me, be patient. Wait here a moment. Just be patient. Perhaps saying this. In life storms, God's grace and love are compatible with what seems like outrageous, even appalling, inconceivable delays, right? It's not like God says, I'll not be hurried even though I love you. Instead, what God is really saying to us, I'll not be hurried because I do love you. Jesus won't be hurried, but we kind of feel like Jairus, don't we? We're impatient because Jesus, God sometimes, the delays in our life seem so irrational because what we want is really good. Both Jairus and this woman, they end up really getting much more than what they came to Jesus for. When you go to Jesus to get help, you're going to give and you're going to get a heck of a lot more than what you bargained for, okay? You just will. So we need to be patient, okay? And often it will work out in a way that we do not expect, all right? Jairus came to Jesus. Jairus came to have Jesus cure his daughter. But he got far more than that. Yes, Jesus is told the girl is dead, but he looks at the father and basically says, I'm going anyway. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why are all the commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. They laughed at Jesus. And after he put them all out, he took the child's father, Jairus, and mother, and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. When they arrived at Jairus' home, everyone's mourning. They're weeping, right? And they laugh when Jesus says she's asleep. I'm sure it was just, one of those sarcastic, wailing kind of laughs. Really, you're ridiculous, man. They know a dead child when they see one. And Jesus takes the child by the hand and says to her, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. Interesting, she was 12. The woman who was suffering from the disease had been suffering for how long? 12 years. Yeah, there's something there. Maybe you can look into that. Do a little study on your own. Why is that? That's not a coinkydink, okay? At this, everyone, they were just completely astonished that this girl got up, right? Everyone astonished. Jairus had hoped for a cure, and he gets a resurrection. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Now, it seemed to Jairus and the disciples that Jesus was delaying for no good reason. They didn't have all the facts. We can look back with our eyes, right? We know that Jesus defeated death. We know he can overcome death. We know he is a resurrected presence in our midst. But the disciples and Jairus, they don't know that at this point. I've sat down with many people through my ministry and have voiced similar words, sentences, phrases of, I do not know why God has not come through for you right now. I do not know why this is continuing. I don't know why you're still waiting on it. I don't get it, okay? I just don't. I don't have the answers. But when I look at God's delays in my life, which is like there's a lot, much of sometimes my anger or frustration, I've had to do some soul searching, but it's kind of like arrogance. No, I know what's right. I know what needs to happen. There's a classic book called The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul. And in it says, in modern Western society, we're taught that nearly everything in life can be manipulated for our own ends. I felt that way last Sunday. I was running around here trying to get some things done for worship. And remember last Sunday we had the 3 birthday cakes for Pentecost? And I forgot the birthday candles. So I run back across to Albertsons to get the candles. Of course, we need candles, and we need fire, Pentecost, whatever, right? And we want to blow them out. And I'm thinking, let's do this. So I'm over there, and it's 10 o'clock. I realize it's 10 o'clock, and I'm standing in line to get candles. They're singing over, you guys are singing over here, and I'm standing in line over at Albertsons. There's one person in front of me. One person in front of me. I think, okay, this is going to go quick. I didn't see they had anything. And they say to the cashier, I'd like to get 3 packs of cigarettes. And I'm thinking, no, you don't, because I know the cigarettes are right there. They're over there at customer service. The cashier's going to walk all the way over there and get the cigarettes. And she goes over and she gets it, and she comes like, no, I wanted menthol. So she goes back, and I'm thinking, really, you don't need the cigarettes. They're cancer sticks. Really, they're not good for you anyway. I mean, I wanted to say all that, and I'm thinking, and they're so expensive. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I had some really bad attitude there. And so when the cashier came back, I said, worship is starting. Can I just give you this $5 and I'll come back when we get change? Or can I just pay for it later? I'm taking these candles. She said, and then another cashier heard what was going on and said, come over here. I'll reopen this register for you. And I said, thank you. And then I felt really guilty. Really bad. And I said, oh, thank you. Now I run over here, and of course we did the whole, but I went back after church and I apologized. It's like, I had this kind of arrogance. No, I have worship to do. I have something real important to do. They can't do worship without me. I'm their pastor, and I have candles, and it's Pentecost. I mean, really, honestly, I'm being very honest with you and genuine. That's what I was feeling inside. And then I felt so ugly. And I'm sorry. And they laughed about it when I went back. They said, you just got to watch your time, Pastor, I said, I know, but I really wanted to blow out candles. Not good. But we think we can just manipulate everything to our own ends and get it done now. We're not God. But we have delusions of grandeur sometimes, that our self-righteousness and arrogance thinks we can just get it done in our time. And sometimes that self-righteousness and that arrogance needs to be knocked out of our hearts by God's delays, seeming delays to us. All right? God ain't delaying. God's doing things on God's time. Is God delaying anything in your life right now? Does it feel that way? does to me. And talk to God about it. Are you ready to give up though? Don't give up. Don't give up. Just keep talking to God. Keep complaining if you need to. But don't disconnect from God. Are you getting impatient with God? It's okay. It's okay to be impatient with God. Just keep talking. Don't give up though. But I think part of the answer is we see in the scripture, and Jairus provides it. It was for Jairus to trust Jesus. I mean, even after being told that his daughter's dead, he's still willing to walk into the room with Jesus, with this man who let his daughter die, and do whatever he was going to do. There was some trust that was going on there, and some faith, even in the midst of death. Jesus says the girl's sleeping. I love this. Because in Matthew and Luke, it's very clear that Jesus knows the girl's dead. All right. And the writer makes that very evident. Here, Jesus just says, the girl's sleeping. The answer to all this, because Jesus does know that she's dead, but the answer to all this is what Jesus does next. He sits next to the girl, right? He takes her hand, and what does he say? He says, Talitha, little girl. It's a pet name, a diminutive term that, similar in our culture today, would be like referring to the little girl as honey. Honey, sweetie. And then the second thing Jesus says to her is, Kum, arise. Not be resurrected, but just get up. Get up, honey. And then Jesus is saying something to this little girl that parents would say to their children in the morning. Honey, it's time to get up, right? It's just time to get up. Jesus is facing death, the implacable enemy of the human race. And he holds the little girl's hand and simply says, honey, get up. Jesus is saying, if I have you by the hand, death itself is nothing but sleep. Oh my gosh. Gives me chills. Jesus' words and his actions are so powerful and they're so loving. When most of us were little, if our parents, mom or dad, happy Father's Day, by the way, Dad. If our mom or dad took our hand and we're holding it, most of us would feel things were okay with the world. Of course, I know there are bad parents. I get it. And even the best of parents mess up at times. But Jesus is the ultimate parent. Takes us by the hand and leads us through the darkness, the deepest of darkness. The Lord of the universe who dances the stars in the sky takes us by the hand and says, honey, time to get up. Time to get up. Why, who do we think we are to hurry someone who is so powerful and so loving? We're full of ourselves, aren't we? This one who treats us so tenderly, who has given us this precious life. Why would we be impatient with somebody like Jesus, who holds our hand through the greatest darkness? There's nothing more frightening to a child than to lose the parent's hand in a crowd or in the dark. But that's nothing compared to what Jesus experienced in his own loss when he lost touch with his Father's hand when he was nailed to the cross. And he went to the tomb so that we could be raised out of it, right? He lost hold of his Father's hand so we would know that once he took our hand, he would hold our hand forever and would never forsake us and never let go. We try to, and sometimes we do. Are you trying to hurry Jesus in your life? Are you impatient with waiting? Let me tell you something. I'm winding it up here. Let me tell you something. Jesus is worth the wait. Okay? He is. He is. So sometimes we're waiting for some things that sometimes you just got to put on our big boy pants and wait. Hang in there. Truth is, not a day goes by that Jesus hasn't reached out his hand to ours and offered us new life. Just whether or not we're looking for it or grabbing for it. So often we're looking elsewhere for love and for happiness. And we keep waiting for things that ultimately will not satisfy us. So let Jesus take you by the hand. Let him do what he wants to do. Trust in him. He knows what he's doing. He loves you completely, okay? So Jesus reaches his hand out to you this day, this moment, and offers us new life. And you know what he says to us? He says, children, time to get up. So First Christian Church, what are we waiting for? It's time to get up. A new life awaits. Amen.